Hello and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker and I'm one of the ministers here. And today I am joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and the worship team of Linda Warren, Heather Thorpe, Drew Collins, Daniel Carnes, and Stephen Gregorius. The vision of First Unitarian Society is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our Unitarian Universalist values in our lives, our community, and our world. For those here with us in person, it is a joy to be here with you. We ask that you leave your mask on the entirety of our service. Kelly and I will be removing ours only when we are speaking. And we ask you to not sing along with the hymns, but rather we do invite you to hum. For those joining us virtually today, we're so glad to have you with us. We hope you will be able to join us for our virtual coffee hour immediately following our service. The information for joining can be found on the homepage of our website, fusmadison.org, as well as on the slide that will be seen again after the postlude. Our announcement slides will also be shown briefly after today's service, and we encourage you to take a moment and learn more about our upcoming programs and activities. And now we have a very special announcement from Steve Goldberg.
Hey fellow Unitarians, I'm Steve Goldberg, and as many of you know, I'm a huge fan of cabaret. And I have the profound pleasure and the high honor of telling you about the 40th cabaret, which is about to begin on Saturday, December 11, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. right here. I'm standing in the place where it's going to happen on Saturday, December 11. I'm standing outside the landmark building, but all of the buildings and the entire property at FUS will be converted to one huge winter festival. Hence the name of the 40th cabaret at FUS. We're calling it Winterfest. We're going to have indoor and outdoor activities. We're going to use the entire property, the entire facility, to help you and your family enjoy this particular important seasonal cabaret event. There will be a bunch of food trucks here, 3 of them in fact. And for your dining pleasure, we will also offer hot cocoa and hot cider. And fire pits like the one behind me will be blazing so that you can make your own s'mores. We'll furnish the ingredients, you furnish the creativity and the appetite to make your own s'mores. Also, we will have, as usual, a live and silent auction. The auctions will take place right here in the Landmark building, and the live auction will occur between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, and I have it on good authority that this year the auctioneer is especially terrific, so you don't want to miss this. We will also have indoor and outdoor activities for everybody. The indoor activities will include decorating our holiday tree. The outdoor activities will include a prairie hike and your opportunity to fill our outdoor bird feeders. So there's a lot of excitement about this, and 75 members and families have already signed up for this event. You can get your tickets online, or you can pay for them at the door. Either way, you're welcome, and you don't have to be here for the entire 5 hours. You can come anytime between 11 and 4, but understand that the food trucks will only be here till 3 o'clock. There's a lot more exciting detail I could share with you right now, but it's too exciting even for me, except to say one thing. Winterfest. We'll have lots of family fun at Winterfest. And the only thing that we request is that you be our guest. It'll really be something. We'll have the whole joint jumping for Winterfest. And I promise that you will be impressed. I just gotta say, please, please don't stay away. of our winter cabaret. That's right, don't stay away from our winter cabaret. I'll see you here at Winterfest. Saturday, December 11, 11 to 4 o'clock. Looking forward to seeing all of you here at the Winterfest Cabaret.
Many thanks to Steve for making that video. And I invite you now to join us in a moment of silence as we center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time as we join together once again in community. Here we have gathered the elements of our lives. Aware and unaware, we have carried them to this place. The joy of waking and living, the pleasure found in meaningful work, the blush of health, the pain of illness, the grief of loss, and the gift of love.
Some of these we have carried a long way. Some have bent our backs until our eyes could no longer see the horizon. Some have carried us upward with purpose, feathered wing in flight.
All we have carried through the seasons of our lives have brought us here to this place we make sacred by our coming together and reciting these words, "Come, you are welcome here." And we invite you now to join in our words of affirmation as we light our chalice. We join our voices in a holy communion of mind and heart, dedicated to the promises that bind us in compassion, one with another. In this hour, we light the flame that signals our intention to find the sacred in every living thing.
Days are breaking in my soul. Please join us in singing or humming hymn number 4, I Brought My Spirit to the Sea. I brought my spirit to the sea. I stood upon the shore. I gazed upon infinity. I heard the waters roar.
And then there came a sense of peace. Some whisper calmed my soul. Some ancient ministry of stars had made my spirit whole.
I brought my spirit to the trees that loomed against the sky. I touched each wandering, careless breeze to know if God was nigh. And then I felt an inner flame that fiercely burned my days. So bright I rose from bended knee to meet the asking years.
When I was a teenager, some Tibetan monks came to the art gallery in the town where I lived, and they made there a mandala. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's it's like a big picture on a table or the floor or some other large flat space, and it's usually round, because what the mandala is meant to represent is the universe, not so much the universe physically, but the universe spiritually. In the Buddhist tradition, life is a cycle. We are born, we live, we die, and then we are reborn again for another ride around in the circle. So the monks that I met, they were making their mandala out of sand, colored sand, and it took a whole week for them to build this beautiful, complicated, intricate picture. And then, at the end of the week, they just brushed it all away, carefully and with intention, but it was gone. It was never meant to last. So that's what a mandala is. And in this story, also from the Buddhist tradition, there was a monk whose spiritual practice was making of mandalas. His weren't made out of sand. They were made out of rice, colored rice, and some other precious objects, like precious stones. He would work into the craftwork of them. But the same basic idea. He would spend all this time building a beautiful picture, and then he would just destroy it at the end and make another one again. So he was in the process of making a mandala one day when a mouse crept out from a hole somewhere that he couldn't see, and it went over to a part of the mandala he wasn't working on at the moment. And he thought that it was going to try and steal some of the rice, but it didn't. Instead, it tried to pick up one of the little precious stones, a little piece of turquoise. It's just sort of bluish green. It's very pretty. It tried to pick one of those up, but it was much too small to lift it. So it just sort of, and then it just gave up and went back to its hole. And the monk thought, what a silly mouse. It could have good rice to eat if it was hungry, but instead it wastes its energy on something of no value that it can't even lift itself. So he went back to work. And then the same mouse came back. And this time, there was a second mouse with the first one. And together, they went up to that same little piece of turquoise. And together, with a little bit of effort, they were able to lift it and carry it back to the hole that they had come out of. Now the monk thought something different. Here he was spending all of his time on something that was never meant to last forever. He knew that he was going to just sweep it all away later on. And he'd been worried about, is this mouse going to disturb my work? But what does that matter? It's just going to be swept away later on. And he thought that the mouse was silly for being worried about the turquoise, something that has no value to it. It's just a mouse, but can't mice appreciate something beautiful just like anybody else can? And if it was worth working together in order to do, well, maybe he was the silly one.
I invite you now into a time of giving and receiving where we give freely and generously to this offering, which sustains our community here and also supports the work of our outreach offering recipient. This week, our offering is shared with Urban Triage, Inc. Urban Triage, Inc. is a Black-led organization that was founded and rooted in the idea of for the people, by the people. They work to empower Black families and children by developing and managing life-changing programming and mobilizing community resources to distribute them to those most in need. So you'll see on the screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You will see our text to give information there as well. And for those of you here in person, there are offering baskets right outside the center doors. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
Chag Urim Sameach. Happy Festival of Lights. We are presently in the midst of the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, the first night of which was last Sunday, and the eighth and final night of which is this Sunday. Of course, many of you knew this already, and even if you weren't conscious of it before the service began, there was a pretty big clue just behind me, next to the chalice. The 9-branched candelabrum, most commonly referred to in English as a menorah. That name isn't wrong, but it's an incomplete truth. The Hanukkah menorah, or Hanukkah, is a special modification of the menorah, a variant of an earlier original that's become much more famous, just like Jimi Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, or Joan Jett's recording of I Love Rock and Roll. The original menorah was a very particular oil lamp, an essential element of Judaism's original temple in Jerusalem. The menorah is so important, in fact, that the biblical book of Exodus devotes an entire 9 verses to God's instructions to Moses on the exact specifications for it. Pure gold, with wick trimmers and trays made of the same, decorated with designs like the buds and blossoms of an almond tree. And very importantly, one central column with 3 branches on either side, for a total of 7 lights, not 9. The Hanukkah is a riff on all this important original design. It's almost a visual joke. It says, this is the funny menorah to remind you of the more important, serious one. See, it has 2 extra arms because the holiday used for it has 8 nights. Get it? It's not just a convenient way to arrange 8 candles with one in the middle, though. Hanukkah commemorates the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire, a culturally Greek military state that ruled the northern Middle East after the death of Alexander the Great. There is some debate about how to view the Maccabees, the Jewish political, military, and religious movement that ultimately defeated the Greeks in ancient Judea. Depending on which accounts you favor, they might be described as freedom fighters for religious liberties, or as fundamentalists who opposed religious freedom for anyone other than themselves. But one or the other, or neither, or both, the events of Hanukkah took place because of a universal truth that all empires would rather believe themselves exempt from. No people ever loved living under occupation, and the violent maintenance of such an unjust state will always eventually lead to atrocity. But here is what I need you to know for today. During the course of the revolt, the Seleucids occupied the temple in Jerusalem, the most revered place in Judaism. They intentionally de-sanctified it for Jewish worship and made it into a temple for their own gods. When the Jewish forces recaptured it, there was a mass flurry of religious activity, trying to make up for all the time that the daily rites and rituals of the temple had been impossible to perform. Hanukkah translates literally as dedication, because the temple had to be rededicated. The reverence that era of Judaism had for that place called on them to renew and restore it, to rebuild the desecrated altar, restore the disturbed precincts, and replace the oil in the original menorah so that its light would shine again. The holiday is still celebrated for more than 2,000 years later, despite the fact that the temple no longer stands. That first menorah has been lost to history, and all of the rites and rituals that seemed so important in the era of the Maccabees have gone unobserved in Judaism for nearly 2 millennia. And while that is cause for deep grief and lament in the tradition, that tradition also generally acknowledges that Judaism couldn't become what it is today without first losing the temple. That that catastrophe sparked a tremendous period of spiritual innovation and religious evolution. This story is just one of many examples of the ways in which human beings express their reverence for what matters most to them by marking certain times or places or practices as sacred, as set apart for a special purpose. The transcending mystery and wonder that opens human hearts and renews human spirits is, in truth, incredibly fluid and impossible to control. So all religions really just create little signs to hint towards the infinite. Signs built on the land, or marked on the calendar, or worn on the body.
I have often wondered about sacred spaces. What makes a space sacred, set apart? What is it about certain places that people will tell you that this is where their heart is opened to that transcending mystery and wonder? Someone who also asks these questions is Tim Seal, who wrote a book called Roadside Religion. Tim spent his days visiting and interviewing folks on the religious fringes. He is a religious scholar married to a Presbyterian minister, and one summer they loaded up their 2 kids and went on road trips to see people's expressions of their interaction with the divine. Expressions that folks invite the public to interact with by putting them right beside the road. At the heart and soul of each one of these places was a deeply imaginative act, an attempt to give outward form to an inner personal experience of the holy. In Roadside Religion, Tim wrote, "The most basic meaning of sacred is set apart. But what sets it apart as such? Different theorists of religion find different answers. Some will tell you that it is what binds us together in community. Some will say it is found in a radical otherness, a mystery that we can try to hold and imagine, yet never fully understand." The historian of religion, Mircea Eliade, said the sacred is the holy other, that it is found in the places where you encounter the divine, in the places where you feel awe, where things have a flash of making sense, where you have a feeling of connection to something larger than yourself, where you suddenly have new information that makes a shift inside you, and suddenly everything is different. And I wonder, when you have that feeling, is it inside you or is it in the place itself? Are there real sacred places, springs and mountains, the coming together of ley lines or a vortex of energy? Or are there just places that have been invested with meaning by the people who carried within themselves a human urge to be part of something larger? I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think anyone does. But I have mentioned my trip to Arizona in early October. I don't think I've told you that one of the reasons I went was to travel to Sedona and visit the vortex sites or the energy sites that are found there. The beauty of that place is astounding. And there was a feeling of exhilaration when we climbed to the top of the Airport Mesa vortex site. Yet I cannot tell you if that feeling was from some energy in that place, or the fact that we were impressed that we could climb that high, or the general joy and wonder of spending time in a beautiful place with a dear friend. On our last day in Sedona, we decided to visit the Amitabha Stupa and Peace Park. Sitting majestically among the pinyon and juniper pines and surrounded by a landscape of stunning crimson spires, it is a beautiful sight to behold. A short trek up winding trails brings you to the 36-foot Amitabha Stupa and the smaller Tara Stupa that are both there for prayer and meditation. The stupa is one of the oldest forms of sacred architecture on earth, dating back to the time of the Buddha 2,600 years ago. Stupas are mostly found in the East and are pretty uncommon here in the West. A stupa is considered to be the living presence of the Buddha, and as such represents the mind of enlightenment. Stupas have been built throughout time as visual, physical prayers to avert war and famine, promote prosperity and well-being. Their sole purpose is to bring benefit for all living beings. Here, walking around the stupa and then sitting in meditation in front of a wondrously carved wooden statue of Buddha, listening to the birds and the footsteps of our fellow searchers, here was the tranquility we sought. There was a palpable sense of peace in this place and inside us. Gradually, we returned to the parking lot, somehow restored by what we had experienced. In that quiet and reflective space, I wondered again about the nature of the holy. What makes something sacred? Here in this place of peace, I believe it was a blend of the natural beauty, the presence of ritual objects, and the simple actions and intentions of the ones gathered there that join together to create a sense of place and a time set apart, creating a holy place. In this place, we were reminded that we are more than ourselves, that we are part of a larger mystery, and that mystery can be, if we are open to it, a partner with us in creating places of peace, places set apart wherever we are.
Unitarian Universalism does not have one uniform set of rules for how we mark out with reverence what is sacred and set apart. It never has, and it hopefully never will. In their signs and symbols, their architecture and their garments, our spiritual ancestors often followed the custom of the dominant cultures by which they were surrounded. We have always been willing to make our own amendments to the convention, of course. Which is why, if you were to visit Transylvania, or the Khasi Hills of Northeast India, or the historically Universalist churches of the Philippines, you would find our religious siblings marking sacred time and space in ways that would probably feel very local and regional to you, but which also mark them as distinctive groups within their own larger culture. It is the same with us here. Our sacred spaces tend to be influenced by the various conventions of Protestant church architecture, but they also vary wildly enough to include such heirlooms as the Tiffany windows of Boston's Arlington Street Church, depicting episodes in the life of the teacher Jesus, the circular sanctuary of the First Unitarian Church of San Jose, with its labyrinth floor, and the fieldstone pulpit and copper prow of our own landmark home. The history of vestments, the distinctive clothing worn by clergy in our tradition, is interesting to me because we adopted the general practice of wearing an academic gown when preaching, and kept doing so pretty uniformly well into the 20th century, even though credit for introducing that practice among Protestants, which is where we got it from, back when we were still trying to be Protestants, credit for that is usually given to John Calvin, perhaps the most profoundly anti-Unitarian, anti-Universalist theologian of the last 1,000 years. Stoles, artful bands of cloth hung over the shoulders, don't seem to have been much of a thing in our tradition until the middle or so of the last century. They seem to have been popularized among our ministers, at least in part, by the Humiliati, a movement for radical reimagining and reinvention in the Universalist Church of America, which also deserves partial credit for the fact that we don't try to pretend that we're just another brand of Protestantism anymore, and don't require all of our clergy to be at least nominally Christian any longer. Why, in short, a person like me can be one of your ministers. Today, not only do we have no hard rules about our clerical garb, even the weekly custom varies from congregation to congregation and minister to minister. Using my own story as an example, growing up, I never remember seeing the ministers of my home congregation in robes or stoles. They wore nice, formal clothing on Sundays. But they did have those garments. By the 80s, everyone in our ministry did, because there was then, and still is now, a strong custom among us that ministers wear them to ordination and installation services, the life cycle events particular to ministers. So when my home congregation ordained me, I wore an academic gown for the 3rd time in my life. And my family gave me this stole as a physical manifestation of that ordination, at which they and the rest of my congregation of origin charged me, among other things, to preach the word of truth in freedom and love, and to set forth by my example, no less than my precept, the principles of our free faith. It's smudged here and there, because I spend too much time around candles when I'm wearing it. But it is among the very most sacred things that I own in this world. Each stole I've commissioned or been given since becoming a minister represents some other important milestone in my calling, my fellowship, my academic degree, my ministry in Massachusetts. The list is hopefully still unfinished.
Growing up Roman Catholic, I have always been aware of the power of ritual garments. I can still remember the joy of seeing the vestments change color at the beginning of Advent, knowing that Christmas would soon be here. Those vestments became markers of time, reminders of seasons, and a shared communal remembering. When I arrived for my ministerial internship in Philadelphia, my supervisors told me that they would robe for worship services and I would join them in that custom, but I would not wear a stole. Stoles were reserved for those who were ordained, and it would be an acknowledgement of that status when I would receive my own at my ordination someday. I received my first stole here in the Landmark Auditorium on October 14th, 2001, when you all granted me the title of Reverend at my ordination. There was a deep power in that moment, a sacred power that connected me to a long history of all those ministers who came before and to those who would come after. And I was stepping into that living stream and taking my place among those who dedicate their lives to our tradition. Upon my installation 3 years later, I was gifted a stole made by Joyce Carey, a beautiful rainbow with flaming chalices on either end. Every time I wear a stole, I am called back to these moments, moments of holy recognition and affirmation of the minister you saw and believed me to be. And I am filled with awe and deep gratitude. They pull me back to moments set apart, moments where I encountered the holy, felt awe, where things had a flash of making sense, a feeling of connection to that which is larger than myself, where suddenly there was a shift inside me and everything was different. And now there is this stole, given to me by you on my 20th anniversary. It is from our partner church in Najoita. The minister of that congregation, Reverend Feketsa Leventa, said this about this stole. I wish for you courage, health, and joy in life and work. When you wear this stole, may you feel always our love and friendship, and may you remember the flame in the chalice is always in light. These beautiful fabrics we wear are so much more than we can see. They are markers of time set apart, bearers of memory and love, reminders of the larger life we share and to which we all belong.
This summer, Kelly and I went on a shared retreat in order to lay a strong foundation for the co-ministry that we are building together, which is itself a scaffold for the shared ministry we undertake collectively as a congregation. One of the questions our retreat leader asked us to reflect on was how we would resolve issues of serious, heartfelt, important difference between us. I offered that I thought I might have a small but significant example for us to work on as a test case. Since my ordination, it has been my custom to wear a stole whenever I lead worship. Like my childhood ministers, I reserve my robe for rare occasions of high ceremony. Nothing against my many colleagues who wear one every Sunday, but when I wear my robe, I am constantly afraid that I am going to trip over it. But I do like wearing a stole. The stoles that I own are precious to me. The act of putting them on marks the time when I'm wearing them as precious and important. They are reminders of promises I have made and people and communities to which I am accountable. Reminders that I want to take with me into the pulpit to help keep me honest. But like you, I'd watch the YouTube videos. I knew that Kelly didn't usually wear a stole to lead worship. And I trusted that her reasons for her choice must be just as deep and as personal as my reasons for mine. So it seemed like a strong difference that we could explore together. It turns out that we're still looking for a difference like that. We'll find one eventually. I'm not worried about it. Because Kelly unfolded for me, as she just did for you, how meaningful and important the wearing of a stole is for her. Religions mark certain times and spaces and actions as set apart with reverence. Exactly how they do it varies from tradition to tradition, and in any living tradition, it also changes over time. The Maccabees marked one particular piece of the earth as holy, with purified oil and ritual and rites. Their descendants practice a similar reverence, but by lighting candles and telling stories in their homes all over the world. We know that seeing your ministers wearing our stoles for worship is a change for this community, which is why we wanted to give you some sense of the personal reasons behind that personal choice. It is emphatically not because we are particularly special or holy beyond the ways in which all people are special and holy. Our tradition is clear. Ministers have no spiritual power to distinguish them from the laity. There is no ceremony I could officiate which any of you could not, no ritual I could perform which any of you could not do just as well. But the work you have entrusted to us is special, is holy. And so we mark the time when we are undertaking this part of it, at least, as set aside with reverence.
Each week we gather, bringing with us the cares and the hurts and the joys of our recent days. We share these here knowing they are held in the love and support of community. Today we light a candle of joy and gratitude in recognition of the 75th wedding anniversary of Al and Sparrow Senti, which is later this month on December 28th. We wish Al and Sparrow a month of celebration, remembering the many stories of a life together and much love. And if you'll join me now in a moment of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, love which holds us, we gather in reverence and gratitude. We are grateful for the gift of another breath and for each moment of connection, beauty, and truth. Cry with us in our pain for our world. Remind us that we are loved just as we are. Remind us that we are connected with all that is. Remind us that we do not journey alone. Give us what we need for today. Call us back to our promises, commitments, and values. Help us to love ourselves and each other, and to show that love in our actions. Make us instruments of justice, equity, and compassion. Free us from all that harms. We declare that life and love are stronger than tyranny and fear, that a world of beauty and love is coming, and that we must shape it together. Blessed be, may it be so. Amen. In moonlit shadows, at the edge of night-darkened oak trees, I see it. Across sunny pathways and the buzzing of insects, amongst the flowering forest greenery, I hear it. From the touch of one's loved, the embraces of those gone before me, I feel it. In the poems I love dearly, the songs that speak to my heart, the sculpture that catches my imagination, the discovery still to be made, I sense it. It is in the fire of distant suns, the cool drip of waters, the slight chill in the breeze, the laughter of children, no matter their age, old and young, grown and small. It is the breath of life, the stardust of souls, the magic of remembrance. Who am I not to surrender to it in gratitude? Who am I not to be blessed? Blessed be, and go in peace.